Felicia Akwose was 3 seconds from walking away from the loudest party she had ever crashed when she heard the splash. Not a normal splash. Not a cannonball, not a drunk rich kid doing a backflip for Instagram. This splash had a sound underneath it. A wrong sound. The kind of sound water makes when a body goes in and doesn't come back up laughing. She had only come to this Gangnam rooftop party because her roommate Yuna begged her, promising free food and zero drama. Free food, yes. Zero drama was already a lie because the pool area had gone from packed to empty in under a minute, like someone had shouted fire, except nobody had shouted anything. The music kept playing. The lights kept changing color. And in the deep end, a man in a soaked black suit was sinking like the suit itself was made of stone. Felicia did not know his name. She did not know he was the only son of Kang Min, the man three rival families called the Wolf of Itaewon behind closed doors. She did not know that the four men standing frozen by the pool's edge were his bodyguards, too busy arguing in Korean about whose fault this was to actually jump in. All she knew was that nobody was moving and a person was drowning, and somebody had to be the idiot who jumped. She kicked off her heels and dove in. The water was colder than she expected, and his suit jacket was heavier than a wet blanket made of bricks. She got an arm under his chin the way her old swim coach back in Lagos drilled into her head, and she kicked toward the edge with her lungs burning. By the time she dragged him onto the tile, the bodyguards had finally remembered they had legs, and one of them was already on the phone, shouting something that sounded like an apology and a threat at the same time. The man on the ground was not breathing. Felicia tilted his head back. She pinched his nose. She pressed her mouth to his and pushed air into his lungs like she had read about in some forgotten first aid class, praying it actually worked outside of YouTube videos. After the third breath, he coughed up half the pool onto her shoes and opened his eyes. The first thing Kang Tae Min said, soaked, half drowned, staring up at a stranger who had just saved his life, was not thank you. It was, "Did you just kiss me?" Felicia stared at him. "I just saved your life." "Feels the same from here. You almost died. And yet somehow you're the one who looks angry about it." One of the bodyguards finally arrived, dropping to his knees, babbling apologies in rapid Korean. Something about losing sight of him for 1 minute. "Only 1 minute, Sayongnim. Please don't tell your father." Tae Min waved him off without even looking, eyes still locked on Felicia like she was the strangest thing he had ever pulled out of a pool, stranger than the fact that he had nearly died in it. "You're bleeding," he said, nodding at her knee, scraped from the rough dive onto tile. "You're welcome," she said. He almost smiled. It looked like his face wasn't used to the shape. By the time the ambulance arrived, unnecessary because he refused to go, Felicia had wrapped a borrowed towel around herself and was trying to find her shoes, her dignity, and her common sense, all of which seemed to have drowned along with the party's vibe. Yuna found her first, eyes wide as dinner plates. "Do you know who that is?" "No, and I don't want to." "Felicia, that is Kang Tae Min. His father runs half the underground money in the city. People do not just dive into pools to save him for free." "I didn't do it for money. I did it because he was drowning." "That man has never once in his life had someone do something for him for free." She would learn exactly how true that was over the next several days because Kang Tae Min did not understand the concept of leaving well enough alone. The first text arrived 2 days later from a number she had never given anyone. It simply said, "You left your shoes." Attached was a photo of her heels, dry now, sitting on a marble counter that looked more expensive than her entire apartment. She wrote back, "Keep them. Consider it payment for the CPR." He replied in under 10 seconds, "I don't accept free things. Come get them yourself." "That's not how payment works." "It is when I decide it." Felicia stared at her phone for a full minute, debating whether to block the number or follow her own foolish curiosity. Curiosity won, the way it always does in stories that end up complicated. The address he sent led her to a building so polished it looked like it had never once been touched by a human hand, all glass and steel and silence. A man at the front desk who looked like he could break a car in half escorted her up without asking a single question, which somehow felt scarier than if he had asked 100. Tae Min was waiting in what she assumed was an office, though it looked more like a museum exhibit about wealth. He was dressed properly now, dry, composed, the kind of composed that only comes from years of practice hiding things. When he saw her, something in his shoulders loosened, just slightly like he had been bracing for her not to show up. "You actually came. You have my shoes. Why, I have a lot of things. Shoes were just the bait." "Bait for what?" He gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Sit. I want to understand something." "I'm not a puzzle." "Everyone's a puzzle. You're just a badly labeled one." Nigerian accent, perfect Seoul subway directions, dives into pools for strangers, refuses payment. None of that adds up to a normal person. Felicia sat, mostly because her legs were tired and her curiosity was louder than her pride. "I'm a nursing student. I came here on a scholarship. I don't do glamorous Mafia rescues for fun, if that's what you're imagining." "I wasn't imagining anything. I was drowning, remember?" "You're never going to let that go, are you?" "Absolutely not. It's the best story I have. Random foreign girl pulls Seoul's most eligible bachelor out of a pool, then insults him about it for free." "I didn't insult you." "You called me an idiot in 3 different ways without using the word once. I counted." She laughed before she could stop herself, and the sound seemed to surprise them both. He watched her like he hadn't heard a real laugh in a long time, the kind that isn't performed for cameras or business partners. "Anyway," he said, sliding a small velvet box across the desk, "your shoes." She opened it, expecting heels. Instead, there was a single bracelet. Simple, elegant, definitely not something a normal college budget could touch. "This isn't shoes." "I lied. The shoes are in the other room. This is a thank you, a real one." "I can't accept this." "You already accepted CPR-flavored mouth-to-mouth from a stranger. A bracelet is significantly less intimate." "Aish," she muttered, and his eyebrows shot up. "You know Korean curses?" "I picked some up, mostly from dramas." "Then you should know the next thing I'm about to say isn't a curse, it's a warning. My world is not safe. People who get close to me get watched, followed, sometimes worse. You saved my life without knowing who I was. If you keep showing up, you'll know exactly who I am, and that knowledge has a price." Felicia studied him, the way his jaw tightened when he said it, like the warning cost him something to give. "Are you trying to scare me away?" "I'm trying to be honest. It's a rare hobby of mine." "Well, Jinja, that's the worst seduction technique I've ever heard." "It's not seduction, it's survival advice." "Sounds like seduction with extra steps." For the first time since she'd met him, he laughed. Actually laughed. The kind that cracked something open in his face she suspected very few people had ever seen. Over the following weeks, what started as returned shoes and reluctant thank yous turned into something neither of them planned for. He would show up outside her nursing class pretending it was a coincidence, even though his car alone announced him from 3 blocks away. She would show up at his office pretending she only came for the free coffee in the lobby, even though the coffee in the lobby was, objectively, terrible. There was a night they sat on the rooftop where it all started, the same pool glowing blue beneath them, and he asked her, half joking, half not, "Would you save me again if it happened twice?" "Depends. Are you planning on drowning again?" "Only if you promise the mouth-to-mouth part." "Persistent." "Patient. There's a difference." She bumped his shoulder with hers, and for a moment neither of them said anything, watching the city lights flicker against the water, the kind of silence that says more than any line of dialogue could. "My father is going to hate this," he said eventually, quiet now, the joking gone from his voice. "Hate what?" "You." Us, whatever this is becoming. He has plans for who I marry, and none of those plans involve a Nigerian nursing student who dives into pools uninvited. I wasn't uninvited. I crashed the party, remember? That makes it worse. Does it scare you? What he might do? Tae Min looked at her for a long moment, like he was deciding how much truth to hand over. Yes, but not as much as the idea of you walking away because of him. Felicia's heart did something complicated in her chest, something between warning and want. Saranghae, she said softly, testing the word like it was made of glass. His eyes widened slightly, surprised, pleased, terrified all at once. You know what that means? I told you, dramas. Say it again, slower this time. Saranghae, she repeated, and this time he was the one who closed the distance, kissing her like a man who had spent his whole life being careful and had finally decided just once to stop. The trouble, of course, started exactly where he warned it would. His father summoned them both 2 weeks later, not as a request but as a command delivered through a bodyguard's flat tone. The meeting room was colder than the pool had been. Kang Min-jae sat at the head of a table like a man who had built an empire out of other people's fear, and when Felicia walked in, his eyes flicked over her like she was a stain on an otherwise clean floor. So this is the girl, he said, not bothering with hello. The one who pulled my son out of the water. Yes, sir. And now you think that earns you a place at my table. I didn't come here for a place at your table. I came because your son asked me to. Tae Min's hand found hers under the table, steady, deliberate. She's not going anywhere, Father. Everyone goes somewhere when I tell them to. Not her. The standoff that followed was tense enough that even the air seemed to hold its breath, but it was broken, unexpectedly, by the appearance of Tae Min's grandmother, a small, sharp woman who walked in without permission and looked Felicia up and down with the precision of someone who had survived far worse men than the one currently glaring at his own son. This is the girl who saved you, she said, not a question. Yes, grandmother. Good. Finally, someone in this family did something useful in a pool instead of just falling into it. Min-jae looked horrified. Mother. Oh, hush. You drowned in a kiddie pool when you were 4. I remember. This girl saved a grown man from the deep end. That takes more than money can buy. She turned to Felicia with something almost like approval. Can you cook? A little, mostly Nigerian dishes. Good. My son only eats bland food because he's scared of flavor. Scared of everything, honestly. Teach him to enjoy something for once. Even Min-jae, despite himself, looked like he was fighting back a laugh, the tension in the room cracking slightly under his mother's complete lack of fear toward him. It did not solve everything. There would be more arguments, more warnings, more nights where Tae Min showed up at Felicia's door looking like the weight of his family name was crushing him slowly. There would be a night, weeks later, where a rival family's men cornered her outside her apartment. Message clear: stay away from Kang Tae Min or face consequences, and Tae Min arrived not with bodyguards but alone, fury barely contained, standing between her and the threat like the pool incident had been rehearsal for this exact moment. Touch her again, he said, voice flat and dangerous in a way she had never heard from him before. And I will make sure you never touch anything again. The men left. Felicia stood there shaking, not from fear of the men, but from the realization of how much danger simply loving this man invited into her life. This is what I warned you about, he said quietly after they'd gone. I know. And you're still here. I didn't jump into that pool because it was safe. Why would I leave now because it isn't? He pulled her into him, forehead against hers, breathing unsteady. Toki, he whispered, a question with no real answer. What do I do? You stop trying to protect me by pushing me away, she said, and you let me decide what risks are worth taking. Months passed. His father never fully approved, not in words, but there was a quiet truce that formed somewhere between Felicia, learning to cook his favorite dishes with a Nigerian twist that even Min Jae secretly enjoyed, and Tae Min slowly stepping back from the parts of his world too dangerous to bring her into. His grandmother became, unexpectedly, Felicia's loudest ally, gifting her a bracelet of her own one afternoon with the simple words, "Family doesn't drown alone anymore." On the anniversary of the night they met, Tai Min took Felicia back to that same rooftop pool, now drained, empty, quiet under the night sky. "Why here?" she asked. "It's not even full." "Because the first time I almost lost everything in this pool. I wanted the next big moment of my life to happen in the same place, except this time on purpose." He knelt down, right there on the tile where she had once pressed air back into his lungs, and pulled out a ring instead of a velvet box. "Felicia Akwose, you saved my life when you owed me nothing. Marry me and let me spend the rest of mine making sure you never regret jumping in." Felicia laughed, tears mixing with the sound, the same laugh that had surprised him the very first day they properly spoke. "Only if you promise not to almost die again." "I make no such promises, but I do promise to always have you nearby in case I do." "Aish," she said, pulling him up by the collar to kiss him properly. "Saranghae, Kang Tae Min." Saranghae, Felicia Akwose. Behind them, the empty pool sat quiet under the city lights, the place where two completely different worlds had collided, and somehow, against every warning, found their way to each other. If this story had you holding your breath, hit subscribe so you never miss the next one. Drop a comment telling me which moment made you scream the loudest, the pool rescue, the grandmother roast, or the proposal, and stay to the end of every video because the best part of this story is always coming right after the part you think is the ending.